The 21st century has been marked by many things, most notably smartphones and social media, with X, formerly Twitter, being one of the most impactful platforms to date. It's completely revolutionized the way we engage with the news, events happening around the world, and culture. It's made people famous and infamous. It's advanced social movements, and it's helped shape so many conversations about how we engage with the world. But the platform has changed trajectory, specifically since it was bought by Elon Musk in October of 2022. And both the company and the user experience is not what it once was. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in this video. This video is part two of a mini series I've now concluded that explores the rise of Twitter to the downfall of what we now know as X. And you don't necessarily have to watch one before the other, but if you're interested, I'll leave the first one in the cards and in the description. Also, I just want to say that I'm here to deliver the facts around what I and many others believe has contributed to Twitter's fall from grace. I am not here to argue politics or debate with anyone about Elon's character. I'm simply here to talk about how X, formerly Twitter, has changed and the patterns of behavior we're seeing on it as a result of its purchase. So that said, please be nice in the comments if you're a fan of the guy and aren't fond of criticisms towards him. This isn't an attack on you. It's an analysis of Elon and his impact on X, okay? We don't have to personalize the way other people feel about those we have parasocial relationships with. Now that that's out of the way, before we get started, I'm gonna go over the timeline of events leading up to the purchase for context. So if you wanna skip that part, timestamps are available. In April of 2022, Elon Musk offered to buy Twitter. And though the formal request to buy the platform happens in April, his intention probably started earlier in the year, January to be specific, because according to information documented in the Securities and Exchange Commission website, which is a government agency that makes sure people buying and selling stocks are being fair and honest, Elon began investing in Twitter around then. And by the time April 4th came around, he was the largest shareholder in the company with a $2.89 billion stake. Then, the very next day on April 5th, Twitter's CEO at the time announced that Elon would be joining the company's board of directors, saying he would bring, quote, great value to the platform, whatever that meant. However, a few days later, Elon came out saying he actually wouldn't be joining the board, and in hindsight, this was a sign of all the back and forth that was about to come. So just to keep track of dates, in January of 2022, Elon began buying Twitter stocks. And then a few months later, on April 4th of 2022, he became the largest shareholder of Twitter. Then the very next day, on April 5th, Twitter announced he would join their board of directors. And then Elon said he actually wouldn't be doing that. Then just 9 days later, on April 14th, Elon announced his offer to buy Twitter for $43 billion because he believed it can neither thrive nor serve free speech in its current state. And its current state at the time being that it was a public company and it has gone private since. And if you're wondering what the internal Twitter team at the time was thinking during all of this, Jack Dorsey, one of the founders of the platform, actually came out in support of this purchase, proclaiming his belief in Elon's mission to extend the light of consciousness, and the light of consciousness being Twitter as a tool of global awareness. Which, listen, it sounds ridiculous, I know, but to be fair, at the time, he obviously didn't have a crystal ball to tell him what was to come. Like, we got to remember that before Elon was this MAGA Republican, he was a standard centrist Democrat. At least that was the type of appearance he was keeping up. Like, once upon a time, Mans was out here chilling with Obama, and he also has a history of donating to Hillary Clinton. And he's also voiced his support for universal basic income, which is a left-leaning policy. And look, obviously people's views can hop to and from sides of the political spectrum, and also grifting is a thing. But I say all of this to say that Jack Dorsey's impression of who Elon Musk was when he first put in the offer to buy the platform is obviously completely different from what it is now. So Elon Musk makes the offer to buy Twitter on April 14th of 2022, and on April 25th, Twitter accepts. By the way, though people associate Elon with X and now being the Oval Office's puppeteer, before that, he was primarily known for his association with Tesla as both the company's CEO and largest shareholder. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because in order to help fund his purchase of Twitter, he had actually sold a ton of Tesla stock. Is that legal? Apparently. Should it be? Well, that's always up for debate, of course, but we're not here for that conversation. Anyway, once May came along, Elon secured some more financing for the deal and started boasting about quintupling Twitter revenue by 2028 and doing other things like reversing the ban placed on Donald Trump from the platform at the time, which, yo, do you guys remember the extent of that ban? Like, he wasn't just banned from Twitter and Facebook and other standard social platforms. He was even banned from Shopify and Pinterest. I saw this tweet that was like, Trump is banned from Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Reddit, even Shopify. At this point, his phone is a calculator. By the time May 13th arrived, so just 2.5 weeks after Twitter initially accepted the deal, Elon tweets that the deal is on hold because he's concerned about how many registered accounts on the platform are bots and spam ones, which is really ironic considering how many bots and how much spam is on the platform today. What he was implying by saying this was basically that Twitter was basically inflating their numbers, therefore inflating their value by saying that only a small segment of their users are bots. So as you can see, he basically starts to try and lay down reasons why he should be able to purchase Twitter at a cheaper price or even back away from the deal. While all of this purchase mess was happening, Twitter stock price was fluctuating a lot and actually ended up dropping more than 12%. And so later that month, Twitter shareholders, aka the people that have ownership in this stock that's dropping, ended up filing a class action lawsuit against Elon, saying that he's manipulating it. Then to make a messy situation even messier, by the time early June came around, Elon started threatening to pull out of the deal completely if Twitter didn't become more transparent about the bot and spam accounts on the platform. Okay, so if you've managed to stay with me up until this point, thank you and shout out to you, because clearly it's a wild ride of a timeline, and I promise we're almost done with this part. The reason why I'm covering it though is because this mess, this whole debacle it's a huge red flag. The biggest red flag of all red flags of the instability and straight up diabolicalness that was headed towards Twitter, its staff, and you and me, its users. So again, June comes around and Elon's like, listen, I'm gonna pull out from this deal if you guys don't get it together. And I guess not enough movement was happening for Elon's liking. So once July came around, he's like, yeah, I'm terminating this deal. But because the purchase was already in process, Twitter was like, you can't actually do that. And so they sued Elon, forcing him to complete the deal, with the caveat being that if he were able to actually terminate it, he'd have to pay $1 billion termination fee. Now, I don't think many of us are going to be in a position to buy or not even that. I don't think many of us want to buy a social media app, but we'll probably buy a home at some point in our lifetime. So I imagine that buying a social media app is like buying a home times 10. It takes time because there's paperwork that has to be filed, there's things that have to be investigated, etc. And once you're already in contract to make a purchase, you can't just back out because so many other parties and aspects of the legal and financial process are involved. And you would assume the world's richest man knows this, but when you're a guy like Elon, you also probably don't think the rules apply to you. Now, to close this part of the video out, I'm gonna run through the rest of the purchase timeline. The trial for the lawsuit Twitter filed against Elon was set to take place in October of 2022, but by the time October came around, Elon ended up going through with and completing the deal on October 28th. And of course, this is when things started to change. A week after Elon officially bought the app, he got to work and Twitter began insane layoffs. I'm talking slashing about 50% of its staff. And this was announced to folks via email with a subject line saying your role at Twitter and the actual email saying today is your last day working at the company. In addition to the layoffs, there were a ton of other downright horrible internal staff policy changes happening. Like folks were told to either commit to an extremely hardcore work environment or leave. And he cut paid parental leave from 20 weeks to 2. Expecting someone to give birth to an entire human being and then show up to work 2 weeks later is crazy. And people weren't just being laid off, they were also resigning, and they were doing it in droves. And remember, like we went over in the video that precedes this one, up until this point, Twitter had always been a platform where people, particularly journalists, were documenting and talking about things in real time. So naturally, they were covering these series of events that were happening at the behest of Twitter's new owner. And using his newfound power as owner, Elon banned several journalists who had been covering everything that was going on, with his reason being that they were doxing him by disclosing his exact real-time location, even though none of them were actually found to be doing that. So Elon came into Twitter with a very rough start, and to make things even worse, at least for him, this is a guy who just made a $43 billion purchase, and some of that purchase being funded by liquidating his other assets. Because of all of this chaos happening on and around the Twitter platform, Twitter lost half of its top advertisers who spent over $2 billion on the platform in ads since 2020. And other really big companies like Chevrolet, Chipotle, Ford, Jeep, and more joined in, announcing that they were going to stop advertising on the platform too. Now, these internal staff changes and relationship changes Twitter was starting to have with other parties was only scratching the surface of things that was about to go down. So I'm going to put the changes I'm going to go over in order because obviously the timeline matters in the build up to the X that we now know. One of the very first things Elon did that had to do with the actual platform user experience was restore previously banned accounts for people like Jordan Peterson, Kathy Griffin, Babylon Bee, and Donald Trump, who were removed from the platform for violating rules against hateful conduct. And he did this on the promise of serving free speech. He also claimed that while he was doing this, negative or hate tweets would be deboosted, which by that, I guess he means like limited in reach. But if you use X today, you know that that's absolutely not the case. And we'll get to that a little later. But yeah, this move definitely set the stage for the free speech that was coming and that we see now. And here's another thing that played a huge role in that. So when Elon was doing his staff layoffs, he also scaled back on content moderators who were responsible for both tracking and dealing with harmful content. And this wasn't a one-time thing either. Like he initially started the content moderation layoffs in October of 2022 when he bought the platform. And those content moderation layoffs was still continuing by the time 2023 came around. So this was an ongoing rolling layoff of people whose sole job was to make sure that the content on the platform isn't harmful. If that wasn't bad enough, Elon also dissolved Twitter's Trust and Safety Council, which was a group of 100 independent people associated with human rights and civil rights organizations who helped strategize on how to deal with things like self-harm, child exploitation, hate speech, and other stuff. And just like how it was done with the initial staff layoffs, the Trust and Safety Council were also notified via email that the group was going to be done because it was no longer fit for purpose. As Elon's way to maintain a level of content moderation on the platform in spite of the content moderator layoffs, he pushed out the community notes feature, which is a crowdsourced way of fact-checking on what was Twitter at the time, by allowing users to do the fact-checking themselves. So basically how this works is by having a range of X users contribute to, like provide context or fact-check a tweet, and those contributions are called notes, hence the notes in the term community notes. Then that set of X users or community, hence community in the term, rates the notes contributed. And then the note that has the best rating is the note that gets placed underneath a tweet. Elon's reasoning for this being the better way to moderate content is that it creates transparency in the content moderation process, as opposed to leaving it up to a corporation or corporate related entity for final oversight. And like, okay, yeah, that actually doesn't sound too bad when you think about it in those simple terms, but unfortunately, it's not that simple because there's still room for gaps in content moderation, because just because you're making a community note rely on the general consensus of a group of people doesn't mean that that general consensus is correct. I mean, groups of people agree on BS every day. And actually, according to a report by the Washington Post, which is based on a report by the CCDH, the Center for Countering Digital Hate, the community notes feature is actually not that effective. This was concluded because the CCDH looked at a set of 238 tweets that were flagged by independent fact checkers and found that out of all 238 tweets, only 20 had community notes attached to them. And so 218 out of those 238 of those tweets didn't even get fact checked. And even when community notes are finally added, it happens hours after a tweet has been circulating through the X ether. And when you think about the virality of X, you know that by the time you're hours out from a tweet making its way around the platform, thousands of people have already read it, digested it, believed it, and sent it to others. So while the whole idea of community notes is in theory viable, there are so many ways that misinformation and disinformation can easily make its way through the cracks. I'll give you an example. So remember when those rumors about Haitian migrants eating pets was going around? Well, this fringe X account called End Wokeness tweeted about it, basically saying that people's pets were disappearing, and it was going around X for 4 days. It got over 5 million views and was reshared 20,000 times. Mind you, police and other Springfield city officials themselves said that these claims were false. And a community note contributor noted this in the community note submission process, citing 5 different articles about it. But because the note didn't get enough votes, it didn't make it to public viewing. And this is just one example of many. And what really makes this whole content moderation situation even worse is that X is also relying on AI to take this on. In a recent global transparency report, X said that they're enforcing rules by using a combination of machine learning and human review. And these machines, aka AI, either take action right away or they flag it to human moderators. But here's the thing. While AI is right at times, it's also wrong at times too. Like AI operates only using data that's fed to it. It lacks the context of real world understanding and nuances. And sometimes it also just makes things up so it can give you an answer. And also, you can't just make moral judgments. The consequences of this shift in content moderation on X are very apparent. And if you use the platform, you can literally see it for yourself. The bots, the hate speech, like really, really, really bad and horrible hate speech. It goes on and it seeps through every facet of the platform, whether that be the For You tab of the homepage and especially the reply section under tweets. There have been multiple times where I click into a post from a news outlet, for example, and in the replies, I see really foul or even just a foul tweet in general, and then I'll report it, and then a few hours or a day or even days later, I'll get a notification saying that it wasn't removed because my claim of hate speech was unfounded, even though it clearly was. And this isn't even just anecdotal. Like, it's very apparent when looking at the numbers submitted by X in their global transparency report. Like, the report to removal or even suspension ratio is so off in proportion to the offenses. Check this out. In an article by journalist Anisha Sarkar for Forbes, which I'll leave linked in the description if you want to check it out, she talks about the global transparency report and how the report basically tells on itself, because while the number of reported accounts and tweets has surged, the platform's moderation decisions have shifted because there's basically been an actual decline in actions taken against hateful content. She specifically notes that there has been a massive surge in accounts reported at 224 million accounts reported in the first half of 2024 compared to 11.6 million in the latter half of 2021. Yet despite the increase in account reporting, actual suspensions only grew marginally, and she also noted that out of almost 9 million reports on tweets around child safety specifically, X only removed 14,000. And if you look at this ratio of reported tweets to removed tweets flagged as hateful content, it's about 5 million removed for about 67 million reported. Clearly, this new system isn't working as well as it was intended to. And regarding the bots, they're another big problem on X. And when I say bots, I'm referring to accounts that have no humans behind them, but are programmed to spread spam in all forms, whether it be spamming an opinion, an agenda, a product, or just spamming for social media engagement. Now, remember earlier in the video, we went over the fact that before buying the platform, Elon wanted to make sure that spam accounts represented less than 5% of users at the time, implying that bots were an issue, which isn't untrue because bots have run rampant on the platform since way before Elon buying Twitter even became a topic of conversation. But this scrutiny and due diligence on Elon's part hasn't done anything to lessen the presence of bots, even now, years out from him buying and putting his hands on it. In fact, if it hasn't grown, it's probably remained consistent in being an issue because bots are still extremely visible and their presence on the platform is very much felt. For example, during the 2024 Super Bowl, X said it was the biggest event ever on the platform with more than 1 billion views and 19 million posts. However, in a data report provided to Mashable by Check, which is a leading cybersecurity firm, about 76% of traffic from X to its advertising clients' websites during Super Bowl weekend was fake. Now, of course, with any social media platform, there's going to be some level of spam and botting, but when they took the data from X and compared it to other social media platforms, none of them came close to the percentage that was from there. These bots also deal with matters of politics too, and they played a role in the lead up to the 2024 election. In a report from Clemson University, 686 bot accounts made over 130,000 posts since March of 2024 that targeted multiple issues and electoral races. They espoused beliefs about voter fraud and ID laws, supported Republican senators, immigration, and other issues. And what makes bot accounts dangerous is that their intention is to make it seem like more people support certain ideals and people than the actual real number of people do. And these bot accounts are programmed to function inconspicuously using regular personas and profile images that also incorporate what's called camouflage posts, which are non-political in nature so that they can blend in as much as possible. This leads us to where X currently stands today, a semblance of what once was Twitter that has now become a breeding ground for spam and inflammatory content without much proper oversight. And as much as I want to show you exactly what I mean when I talk about the rampant inflammatory content that's on X, so you can understand the extent of the issue if you're not on there, I'm not going to platform racism, sexism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and all the other forms of hate speech even more, so I won't. But trust me when I say that the content that is now allowed to make its way through X is absolutely disgusting, dangerous, and regressive. I'm talking as disgusting as content using racial slurs and thought pieces that justify returning groups of people back to historically oppressive conditions that we study now and understand as atrocious acts against humanity. Being on X sometimes feels like being on 4chan. Like the things you see on there are things you should only expect to see in the hidden corners of the internet. And this isn't conjecture either. In an analysis conducted by PLOS1, which is a peer-reviewed scientific journal, they found that hate speech on X has increased since Elon Musk acquired the platform. Specifically, the data from the report shows that after Elon bought the platform, hate speech rose by 50%, and engagement with hate speech, specifically via likes, increased by about 70%. Now, correlation doesn't always imply causation, but one can assume that Elon's content moderation changes have contributed to this. And while some might argue that hate speech is the cost of maintaining free speech, it's important to note that being exposed to hate speech and supporting ideology continuously leads to prejudice, dehumanization, and lack of empathy, because over time you become desensitized to it. And quite frankly, the truth is there are just certain conversations that shouldn't even be entertained in the first place. So given everything we just discussed, how is X doing as a platform? Well, for starters, some pretty big brands and people have outright left, like Elton John, media outlet NPR, and PBS, among a bunch of other people and brands as well. And that was only during the early days of Elon becoming one with the platform, because I'm sure you've heard that even more people have moved over to Blue Sky, which is basically X, formerly known as Twitter, their cousin platform. I did a video on this, which I'll link to in the description and in the cards in case you want to check it out. Now, as far as where X stands on the valuation scale, the company has been severely devalued at 72% less than what it was valued at when he first bought it. And the value of X hasn't just decreased for its beneficiaries, the general public perception around it has gone downhill too. What does this mean for the future of X? Will things just continue to spiral downward from here? Probably, but I don't think it'll dethrone X, formerly Twitter, as one of the biggest players in social media, at least for the next while, because it's still the place people go when some big news breaks and for real-time chit-chat on trending topics. And I don't think it has much to do with reluctance to leave as much as it has to do with users and the media on it just being a force of habit. I think it would take another platform becoming as globally big as X to change that tide. But with all things, time will tell. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. For more on all things social media, so news, culture, and the occasional 101, hit that subscribe button because there's more to come. Till next time.